Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Policies, out about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new self-titled debut album from Viet Cong. So I've talked a bit before about how various musicians in indie rock, they've got a reputation for having multiple projects running simultaneously in order to try out different styles or sounds, or simply find that one project that manages to catch fire and get them popular. The funny thing is that in the age of the internet, acts can very quickly build an underground cult following. And with sites like Pitchfork covering many of these projects and giving them airtime, it means that critical acclaim can befall an act without sales or additional popularity really coming along to give them a boost. And if these artists, they want to move along and try new things, it can mean that they can leave their fan bases hungry for more and following what these artists might try to assemble next, even if it has nothing to do with that old project. And the more I started digging into Canadian indie rock group Viet Cong, the more I expected that some of the hype surrounding this band was coming a lot from this phenomenon. Now, two members of the group, drummer Michael Wallace and bassist Matthew Flegel, were previously from the critically acclaimed art rock group Women, which briefly made a splash in the late 2000s with two pretty damn great records before breaking up sadly mid-tour, which took a jangly, lo-fi yet exceptionally melodic and hook-driven sound and paired it with skeletal production that drew a lot of comparisons to a darker, more stripped-down Beach Boys, or especially the Velvet Underground. As such, I could definitely see the interest now being taken in Viet Cong, even though that band was advertising their sound as having a much stronger post-punk influence. But hell, I like post-punk music, so I made sure to give Viet Cong's self-titled debut album a couple really deep listens. What do we get here? Well, overall, a pretty damn interesting record, and one that's significantly trickier to decode than one might expect upon first or second listen. I'm not gonna say that Viet Cong's self-titled debut works all the way through or is great, or is the second coming of Women for which so many people were hoping for, but as its own distinctive post-punk inspired noisy animal with more focus on twisted, ragged grooves over melody and a wry sense of gallows humor, it's definitely got a certain charm to it. In other words, I definitely liked it. So okay, let's start with our band themselves, and to some extent, if you're familiar with the production stylings of Women, you're not going to be all that surprised here. Jagged guitar lines with a very prominent treble, sharply defined slices of distortion, propulsive march and gallop like beats, and percussion rumble with lo-fi menace, cavernous drowned out vocals, that's all here. But Viet Cong's post-punk influences are a lot more prominent. Shimmering, faded keyboards, a tone that's all exposed, distorted nerves and tension, skeletal, noisy, and lo-fi, but with enough cleaner elements to lend this album a fair bit of poise and almost an elegant feel. If I were to have a production element to really criticize on this record, it'd probably be in some of the bass lines. None of them feels a little bit formless and lacking in real rollicking force to complement the mean wallop of the drums. And that means some of the more chaotic elements of this album do have a little bit more free reign than one might expect, which can lead to off-kilter key changes or tracks stretching their grooves into longer progressions, like on the 11-minute closing track Death. But make no mistake, some of these progressions are pretty damn potent, like the thunderous crunch of the beat of newspaper spoons that essentially lets keyboards creep in near the back half of the track, the stiff gallop of March of Progress that eventually kicks into brittle plucked arpeggios, the sizzling haze of distortion on Continental Shelf that's fragments of definition with the more prominent bass, the guitar melody, and the jangling percussion, which I really liked, and that great synth backdrop on the chugging grooves on Silhouettes. And yet, some of these progressions, it's a bit of a mixed blessing. For as good as some of them are, the fact that this album is only 7 tracks and most of the songs do run long, it means we don't get a lot of variety outside of very incremental shifts in key or tempo. And I get the feeling that Viet Cong probably could have afforded to push a little bit harder here and experiment just a little bit more. Now granted, to some extent this album does feel like a reset button coming off of Women, maintaining a new approach but not quite all the same growth that came off of Public Strain. And to some extent that's expected with a debut in this vein and creating a new sound. It helps matters that Matt Flegel's voice is a natural fit for this brand of post-punk. Energetic yet melancholic, poised in control yet acrid and bitter, buried beneath the mix where he can be heard but not always easily understood. And really that's an apt fit for the lyrics too, which toe the line between typical post-punk angst and sheer, seething irritation and bitterness at an uncaring, painful world around him. I definitely dig the technical songwriting on this record, as the lyrics are wordy and complex yet somehow very oblique and a little confusing at points, sketching situations of tension and bitterness and anger very abstractly, yet never really having the directness of a band like, say, Savage's. Viet Cong are more content to let the songs simmer and seethe and stew, which does a lot for creating a lot of mood, if not real climax points. But okay, what are the lyrics actually about here? Well, honestly, it's kind of hard to say, particularly as in interviews, Matt Flegel said that he intended a certain element of twisted humor with them, laughing at the bleakness of the world, almost ridiculous in some of their grand posturing and hyperbole. It definitely shifts the mood of the track like Pointless Experience, a song where growing old and dying almost seems like a respite, a balm, something you want against the pain of existence, and it makes lyrics like poisonous gas is a pointless experience almost kind of funny in a gallows humor sort of way. And when viewed in that context, the wry commentary adds a really odd flavor to Viet Cong. Still bleak to be sure, but it's a sort of bleakness that's so banal and bigger than oneself, it can't help but laugh at one's insignificance in the face of it all. That and the overall production style remind me a fair bit of another Canadian indie band, Aught, which dropped their debut album last year more than any other day. But where Aught was trying to find something to hold on to against the impending loss of control, Viet Cong, they're just along for the ride, with the bemused expressions of those who can't quite believe what's happening, but we're just taking it in as it is. It gives the toxic relationship of March of Progress to the lurid insanity of Bunker Buster, or the pragmatism of Silhouette's added context. When faced with things that one can't or won't understand, a way you can deal with it is just taking a step back and adding some context, like the bigger picture in the face of anxiety of a world collapsing in upon itself on Continental Shelf. Hell, even the closing track, Death, is almost resigned to the inevitable end, because really? What else are you gonna do? Now, one can make the argument that the juxtaposition of said self-awareness can undercut some of the real tension of this record, and I completely agree with that, because that's the point of gallows humor. Furthermore, it fits with the overall instrumental flavor of the album, a thin point of respite against crushing rhythms or anarchic waves of noise. That said, I won't deny that it also means that Viet Cong doesn't quite have the same immediate punch as other post-punk records, which can mean it takes a lot of listens to really sink in. And I will say that some of the more outright abrasive moments, particularly in the guitar melodies, didn't always click with me, especially considering they occasionally feel included for the sake of the sound rather than the overall cohesion of the songs, which did kind of bug me a bit. But you know what? At the end of the day, I really dug the self-titled debut from Viet Cong, and it's getting a very strong 7 out of 10 from me. Definitely take the time to check this out if you're a fan of post-punk and or of women, because this is very much up that alley. But if you're in the mood for some noisy post-punk that's more thought-provoking than you might express, definitely give this album a listen. You won't be disappointed. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.